Alrighty, all. Welcome back to the channel today. We're back on the internet together again, and we're talking about the anti-immigration rallies and subsequent counter-protests held across Australia. Let's jump into it, you pack of racists.
Second round of anti-immigration rallies is kicking off in Australian cities today. The so-called March for Australia is demanding the government end what it calls mass immigration. At the same time, counter-protests are also taking place in some...
Good sign. What it calls, so what people are calling, it's not obviously mass immigration, it's what people are calling it. No, it's mass immigration. You're bringing in 500,000 or 600,000 people a year. What is that? It's not minor immigration, is it? Gotta love it. Albo is a traitor and a wanker.
cities. Fiona Willan is at Sydney's March for Australia protest and joins us now. Hi there, Fee. What's happening there behind you?
Well, Mel, this group is now making its way through the CBD. They're being led by police. As you can see, many of them are waving Australian flags. Before they set off, the organiser gave a bit of a speech saying if they happen to come across an anti-racism rally that's taking place in the area, don't make any trouble, be loud but not violent. So that was the advice. As you can see, they are certainly...
That's a nice young set of racists. I mean, that's the thing. If you say anything about immigration, you're instantly called a racist because there are people out there, and let me guess, they're going to be Aussies or people who live in Australia wearing Palestinian garb for anti-racism rally. You can't make that shit up, can you? That's what's going to happen here. Probably going to be some clashes. It's going to be all over the news. I've been looking around for content on these marches today. It's pretty light at the moment. Clearly, they don't want to promote that people are still fed up with the government. And that's what these marches are. Yes, mass immigration is a government policy, but a lot of people are very annoyed about how the government is running this country, or more so, or more fitting, running it into the ground. That's what this is all about in my eyes. Yes, you're going to get some people on the fringes who are going to say, get rid of all the Indians and Asians or whatever it is. I'm sure most people aren't thinking that. End mass immigration means let's just stop bringing so many people in. Can we just reduce the number, please? Because there is too much congestion on the roads. Infrastructure is just not holding up. It puts a whole strain on all of our supply chains. The price of everything goes up. But that's great because that's exactly what the government wants. And that's what big business wants. More mouths to feed, it's more revenue. More people in the country working, regardless of what that employment is, more tax revenue. More visas for people to come over and pay $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 to get into the country. Gotta love it. So I wouldn't call it an anti-immigration rally. I'm going to call it anti-government. The anti-Labor government protest. That's basically what it is.
Being very loud. Different people I've spoken to today say they have different reasons for being here. Here's what a couple of them had to say.
The roads are so congested. The trains and public transport are so congested. We are not made to have 8 million people in such a small area.
There's no racism at all. We're accepting of everyone. I've got friends, Sri Lankan, Muslim friends. They want to behave themselves and integrate and be part of the Australian community. Everyone's welcome. But they need to be bringing skills to better the country.
Spot on, mate. Bring a lot of welfare leeches as well. People who suck off the teat of Centrelink and they get special payments and all that sort of jazz. I think it's a real insight into society and how we've been programmed not to talk back or question anything when it comes to mass migration or anything about people who aren't white, because you're instantly made to be a racist. Mass migration doesn't mean that it's people who are not white who are coming into the country. There are a lot of immigrants coming from the UK, Europe, etc. But that guy had to state, and I've also found myself doing it in the past, and I've stopped doing it, saying, no, I'm not racist because I have friends who are Indian, and I've got an ex-girlfriend who was, Sudanese. I've got an ex-girlfriend who was Chinese. Well, you have to say that to try and get your point across, because what people who are on the other spectrum of politics, I guess, which will be the left, they will say that you're a complete racist and they won't listen to any of the reasons or arguments why you might have an issue against immigration, apart from the colour of the people's skin. That's the only thing they can push back on, because the other arguments are completely valid and they can't be argued against. You got what's another big one that's annoying everybody? Well, not even annoying. It's causing severe strain, stress for many families and individuals out there. Lack of housing. Go to Melbourne CBD. I'm from Melbourne. Go to Melbourne CBD. More and more people are doing it rough, living on the streets. Even my local area, the local Woolworths and Coles, you got people sitting out the front with signs. You never saw that stuff before in the suburbs. You might have seen it in the city in the past. You're seeing it in every suburb. People off their head, schizophrenics, mental health issues, have been on the street too long. The joint's a complete zombie war zone. People say, "No, you're being too extreme." Go to Elizabeth Street. Go to Burke Street Mall. Go have a look around there. Complete units walking around there and carrying on. And people won't even turn their heads now because they're so used to it. People are off their face on drugs, or people screaming and being violent. People don't even look. It's not even outrageous. It's normal. So you got more people coming in when we already have constrained housing. Supply is not keeping up with demand. Even organic demand, i.e. people being born here, let alone hundreds of thousands more people on top of that every year. Just to turn around and say people are racist and un-Australian for being concerned about their quality of life, to me, is really disingenuous and very harebrained.
Now, you may be able to see the front of the march looks very different to the one that took place here in August. Back then, it was led by a small group of neo-Nazis, including one who got up on stage and gave a speech. I should point out that many in the crowd booed him during that speech. And people that we've spoken to today say that group would not be welcome back here. They feel that it does a disservice to their message, and certainly that we haven't seen any signs of them so far. I believe they're not planning to march again until Australia Day. Mel?
Meanwhile, our reporter Natasha Shapova is at a counter rally in Melbourne.
And look at them. You got these bloody soy boys screaming and carrying on, fight the right. That's the sign. It's all about political posturing. It's got nothing to even do. That is use this as an opportunity to get out there and make noise. So that was a peaceful protest. You got little kids holding up the signs at the front. You got these university student muppets holding up signs here. No skin in the game on anything to do with racism or immigration or anything like that. A lot of them are rich kids or kids from solid means looking for a cause to latch onto. The university industrial indoctrination complex, here it is at work. Look at it.
Hi there, Natasha. What's been happening where you are?
Good afternoon. Well, we've actually had to step away from the group because stun grenades went off, and it was really quite loud. Everyone scattered just behind me.
Unite to fight the right. That's what they're saying. So just think about who are the socially aggressive people here. Who are the people doing the wrong? They've mobilised because they knew that there would be anti-immigration or March for Australia protests or walks, whatever you want to call it. They've come here to specifically cause trouble. These are the ones who are violent. These are the ones who are being antagonistic, getting in people's faces with megaphones in the street and screaming. And then one of them gets dropped on their head because they've just crossed the line. And then it's violence and Nazis that are attacking us. Nutters. Absolute nutters.
The group that I'm with is the counter protest for the March for Australia rally, and they've marched all the way from the State Library of Victoria to Parliament, almost to Parliament.
Look at them, because they're doing it. It's all this taking the excuse to wear pro-Palestine stuff. It's not anti-racism. They're using it as another excuse.
We're actually outside the Princess Theatre, where there's hundreds of police. They've sort of formed these two lines because there's one group here with the counter protest and there's the riot squad, there's mounted police, and they've created this gap between the two groups, and then another line of police officers that are with the March for Australia rally, stopping the two groups from merging. Now, what the March for Australia rally is calling for is it's an anti-immigration rally, basically, and it's their second one. The first rally was in August, of course, and the group behind me, the counter-protest.
Anti-mass immigration, so it's not anti-immigration, i.e. people who have immigrated here. It's closing the doors. Please, did you hear the people that are out here? There's an elderly gentleman there. Is he violent? No, he's there coming to express his opinion. Oh no, that's you hate black people, apparently.
They're speaking directly against the racism and fascism that they're claiming is coming from that other group. And in the speeches today, we heard that they've promised to always come to these protests, every March for Australia protest that is organised in Melbourne. They've promised...
Have a shower. Look at these people. Go have a shower. You imagine the smell in that group.
To also come to counter that message, to stand up against racism and say no to a white Australia. Now, that protest was quite controversial in August. We, of course, heard from one of the speeches, one of the men who gave the speeches was a prominent neo-Nazi, Thomas Sewell, who's since been jailed. And this group...
You knew you were going to latch onto that. So those neo-Nazi guys, they're just as bad as these people here, in terms of being inflammatory and saying outrageous things. Most people are not going to want to be associated with them. It's a very loud, minor, very fractional minority of Australians who think like that. But they've associated it with that. That's the media that we live in. Not very anything. They're creating a narrative. You saw a couple of little kids there holding the flag, walking along. You got these people getting sprayed in the face by capsicum spray because they're being disruptive.
Here with the counter-protests, there's a range of messaging here as well. They're calling to free Palestine. There's a First Nations group that's leading this protest as well, and they're calling for sovereignty and for treaty. And the police are here. They've got additional powers today to...
So it's not anti-racism at all. It's just people coming out. They want to use the opportunity to use the anti-racism thing as a platform. The anti-immigration thing as a platform to go and start saying free Palestine and all these other things. I thought didn't these guys get the message? I thought, to my understanding, there's a ceasefire at the moment. So what are you protesting about?
In the CBD and just outside the CBD, they're able to search anyone for weapons, and they're also able to direct people away from the city if they believe that they are a threat and potentially might cause some violence, or if they refuse to remove a face covering.
Okay, Natasha.
So that's in Melbourne. Look at them. So they're actually starting shit with the cops.
Shapova reporting in Melbourne there for us. Thanks for the update.
All right, I'll leave it there. So halfway, guys, if you're enjoying the content, consider subbing to the channel. Share your thoughts on all this. If you agree with me, disagree with me, that's fine to disagree. We don't always have to agree with what people say. This is an opinion. Put in the comments why you disagree. I'm happy to hear about it. If you want to support the channel, you can do so. There are ways to do so in the video description and pinned comment. Well, let's move on to the next back half of this show today. Now, I hate to say I told you so, but probably about 6 months ago, I was making videos on this channel talking about the property market and how it was going to resurge. It was going to take off again once rates started coming down. And people were saying to me, you're off your head, you're on the glass, you're smoking, you're cooking on the glass Barbie, all that sort of stuff. And fair enough, it was an opinion, it was a punt. I don't have a crystal ball. But now we've had the highest levels in about 4 to 5 years of property investor activity. So it's all starting to steam up again. Now, I'm not saying I support it, because all that's going to do is push up property prices. It's going to put properties in the hands of people who own multiple of them, who don't need to have multiple. And it takes a home away from someone who may be able to otherwise afford that home and live in it. All right, let's go.
Roaring back into the property market and currently make up their highest share of lending since 2017. Roughly 1 in 7 Aussies own a rental property, and with interest rates still falling and rents rising, the outlook for investors has been improving significantly. A new report released by REA Group and Terry Shear this week has analysed this rising level of investor activity. So for more on this, I'm joined by Angus Moore, Senior Economist at REA Group. Angus, thanks for your time. What's really caused investor activity to surge over the past 12 to 24 months?
All right, I'm going to tell you. I'm not the head economist of a realestate.com group, but I'll tell you. It blatantly comes down to the availability of credit and how much that credit costs investors. Every one of those rate cuts increases the borrowing capacity of someone looking to purchase an investment property or a property in general, but we're talking about investors in this one. And so a lot of people could be very close to the line. They're not be able to get over. You get one or two cuts, it puts them back in business to get over that hurdle to get formal approval for mortgage application, investment loan application. That's exactly what this is. There's also FOMO. Investors are having FOMO too. We get a couple more rate cuts. Now, there's two schools of thought here at the moment. A lot of people are saying, nah, that's it. The rates can't go down anymore. Economy is doing fine. Inflation's sort of tracking along okay. It isn't a threat too much anymore. But it's not coming down as much as you might like, but it's staying holding steady. But have a think about this. Have a think about this. You got a lot of people on the sidelines, waiting, ready to go, getting market ready. Now we have those rate cuts. Now it's looking like unemployment is ticking up. Now we've been told unemployment has been low, and therefore that was one of the main reasons why last month's meeting at the RBA, they didn't drop the rates. Now, it's looking more and more likely that they're going to drop them in November. Now, who knows what's going to happen? So they're the two schools of thought. Some people are saying, no, this is it. This is the new normal. And others are saying, we've got 1, 2, 3 more to go. Now, they've got 2 or 3 more cuts. Right? People are going to be running into the market. There's going to be an absolute pump. Now, I don't own investments anymore or anything like that, so I really don't care about it. But what I'm trying to tell you is this is what's happening on the street. I know a lot of people who work in real estate, both in property management and in sales, and I've had people in sales telling me it's hot out there. I know a couple of mortgage brokers as well. They're telling me they're getting run off their feet with inquiries. So that is just a perfect storm. Given another rate cut or two, people are rushing in.
Great to be here, Ed. As you say, really the big thing that we're seeing driving investor activity at the moment is the fact that rental market conditions are just very, very tight. Rental availability is extremely challenging around the country at the moment, with vacancy rates at very low levels. That's seen rents grow very, very quickly, particularly in places like Adelaide, Perth and Brisbane. Over the past 5.5 years, rents in Perth have grown more than 80 to 90%.
That's incredible.
Eye-watering pace of growth. That's obviously a very attractive environment for investors, and so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a big pickup in investor activity over the past couple of years. Bottomed out as the RBA was raising rates really quickly in 2022, but it's really come back and much faster than other buyer groups. Yeah, we've got a few charts from the report we can put up on the screen. The first one, you've done an analysis of investors themselves. It's a breakdown of roughly the number of properties an investor owns. And obviously most people just own one property, but clearly there's quite a few investors out there with big portfolios. Yeah, that's right. Investing in Australia is actually quite common, particularly relative to what's true in other parts of the globe. So around 1 in 7 Aussies own a rental property.
That's incredible, isn't it? So number of households, so this must be investor households, because there's a lot of people out there who don't own a home. I think it's 30% or more of the population. No, is it 60% own a home and 30% rent? I think it's 60% of people own and 40% of people rent. Anyway, something like that. I'm not going to get caught up on the numbers. But out of that, then 60%, some of those people also have investment properties. So those who have investment properties, one investment property on top of the primary place of residence, almost 70% of people with 2, 20.4, 3, 7.7, and 4 or more investment properties, 4.3. Now, back in the day, I think this was a really good idea and strategy in how to make money, or it's obviously resulted in where we are today. But in my honest opinion, especially if you're doing this in Melbourne, the numbers don't stack up. Like if you got 4 investment properties or more, even 2, even 1, land tax is going to bend you over. Not even going to get so much as a courtesy of coconut oil. You're going to be paying thousands extra a year just for the courtesy. And because you own a home, the government's going to come with their hand out, rattling the tin. So I can't imagine having 4 or more, because it isn't just 4 sets of land tax. For every subsequent property, they add an additional multiplier. So I don't know, if you want to be giving tens of thousands of dollars to the government for the pleasure of us owning some homes, it's up to you. It doesn't stack up for me.
Of those, the vast majority, about 2/3, own just 1 rental property, and then another about 1/5 own 2. But there is a tail of people who have much larger portfolios, and obviously they account for a larger share of rentals than they do of investors, because they have very large portfolios and therefore account for more of the rental properties. Though I wouldn't want to overstate the number of these sort of very large holdings. The number of investors with in excess of 6 properties is about 1%. So it's not a huge share of the population, but certainly still there.
Another chart we can show on the screen is the average age of investors that own a rental property. Clearly, it's skewed towards the more older people. Has that changed at all over time?
Yeah, it has, which I think is quite an interesting change. What we've seen is that the share of investors that are aged sort of towards the end of their career, towards retirement age, has actually been increasing over time. And that's come at the detriment of sort of younger investors. We're just not seeing that sort of
younger investors. I think it's even just younger people in general, or even first home buyers. I think what they consider people young is under 40 buying a house now. It used to be under 30. Now, if you own a house now under 40, or a property under 40, you're doing well for yourself. A lot of people buying them in their 40s first homes because they're just too expensive, especially in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. More specifically, the latter two. Melbourne's now the third, I think. Melbourne's sort of been tracking sideways a little bit. We got Sydney and Brisbane pumping. A lot of money flowing into property there. I don't know how a young couple, even who have 2 really good jobs, by the time they're 30, could save up enough to get a deposit for a $1.2, $1.3 million house, like a family home. That's sort of what it's going to cost you these days in an okay suburb. What's that? It's about $300,000 you need to come up with. 250 grand or more, plus stamp duties and everything else that it costs to buy a property. All those hidden transaction costs that people don't think about. I said, I don't think there'll be a crash. I had that video I made yesterday, Steve Keen, talking about a massive crash. I don't know. I just think people will do whatever they can to own, to buy, to keep a roof over their head, to have that little slice of the Australian dream. They'll eat beans and rice for 20 years, no problem. They'll sacrifice any enjoyment in their life to be able to say they own a home.
25 through sort of 45 age group make up as high a share of the population of investors. It's also worth noting, investing in property post-retirement is fairly uncommon. We do still see some investors aged, 65 through 75. There's not a lot over 75, which is perhaps not surprising. It's obviously hard to service an investment loan once you've retired, and the benefits from negative gearing aren't there once you've retired.
Yeah, another chart we can put up, it shows rental yields versus mortgage rates tracked on the screen. And I think what jumps out at me is you can clearly see home loan rates are falling, but rents, as you touched on earlier, they're not really moving anywhere.
Yeah, we've certainly seen the pace of rent growth slow down in recent years, and so what that's in the past year or so, and what that's meant is that gross rental yields have been fairly stable because home prices have still been rising as well. So the gross rental yield, that is the rent divided by the price of the home, has been sitting fairly stable after recovering over the previous years when rents were growing very, very quickly, contrary to what they had been doing during the pandemic, which it's hard to remember now, but rents actually fell in Sydney and Melbourne.
For those of you who don't know what a rental yield is, that's just how much proportion of rent you make in a year over the total debt that you have out on that property. Yields are shit. If you're buying a house right now, they're not good, especially even at the rates where they are now. The yield's going to be bad. You're going to be negative cash flow straight off the bat. So that game of losing money So you get a house for many years to maybe get a big enough capital gain down the line to cover all your losses, adjusting for inflation as well, and get a little bit of money on the side on top of that. Think about that. And all the whole way along the way, you're giving the government money. Land tax, rates. Just think about that. People don't think about it. They don't think about all those holding costs. It doesn't make sense to me anymore if you to do it now. The debt is too high that you have to purchase. The rents aren't catching up, and who can afford rent going any much higher? Like, I know rents will go up, but it's more and more people who can't pay it. I saw a house for rent today on a billboard, or one of those electric, not a billboard, one of those little TV screens they have inside the real estate office windows now, and how the different properties flick over and change. And I had a look at that, and it wasn't an area that was too great. It was okay, but it was in a really nice house. $1,800 a week for rent. $1,800. $1,800. I couldn't. Who is paying that? Someone is. And as I said, there are a lot of people with money out there. That's why people say to me, "Who's buying these houses?" People who can afford fucking $2,000 a month in rent, a week in rent. Excuse my language. Joint's cooked. A lot of people are getting left behind. Now, I'm not making this second half of this show as to rub it in your face or anything like that. I'm not saying that I was telling you what was going to happen. I didn't say I wanted it to happen. But this is what's going to happen. I don't see any crash coming. People have been saying crashes are going to happen. I've been hearing it for the last 20 odd years that nothing's happened. Ever since I sort of got interested in property and just started looking at it and got interested in learning more about it. Everyone's been saying, "Oh no, don't buy now. The place is about to crash. When it crashes, you can get a fire sale, buy a house half price." And people listen to people who say shit like that. They stand on the sidelines, even if they might be eligible to get in the market. And then they're still standing on the sidelines 10 years later and the house is double the price. So, do I think a crash will happen? I don't think so. I think the government will keep pumping it up with other schemes and things like that. It's what's been going on forever.
Melbourne at the start of the pandemic. So we did see rental yields falling through that period, but they have kind of recovered since and been a bit more stable more recently.
And then looking around Australia, where are the really popular areas that investors are looking to purchase property?
Perhaps unsurprisingly, the most popular areas in terms of where we see investors overrepresented in purchases is inner city Sydney, inner city Melbourne. They're big rental markets, a lot of renters, a lot of rental demand, liquid markets, obviously a lot of investor interest in those areas. But outside of those perhaps obvious choices, what we do see is quite a lot of interest from investors in more affordable parts of our major cities. Think places like Ipswich in Brisbane or Parramatta or St Mary's in Sydney, places like Tullamarine in Melbourne. These are quite attractive areas for investors as well, partly because they tend to carry a higher rental yield. Not always, but on average tend to, and they represent a more affordable entry point than somewhere like an inner city Sydney.
That's right. You get all the migrants going there, going into the outer satellite suburbs. They need somewhere to rent. So you pushes up the prices of the rent there. I remember, it wasn't that long ago, I think it was say 10 years or so ago, you go out to areas now, I'm talking about Melbourne or Victoria here, Berwick, Officer, Pakenham, Frankston, those were cheap. Like very cheap. Anyone could buy a house there. Now they're getting expensive. And then to rent, the rents aren't super cheap because people don't want to live there anymore. People will live wherever they can get a house. It's nuts. And I don't think anything's going to happen to make it better. I don't think it can be made better. Yeah, maybe at some point there'll be a crash. I don't think anytime soon. As I said, there's people rushing to buy more investment properties. And they may get rid of negative gearing and capital gains, 12 months, discount. I think that might slow things down for a bit, but I think people are always going to want to own a tangible asset. You don't want to keep your money in cash, so people buy gold or property. Keeps its value.
And the price growth can be a lot better, can't it, in places like that compared to potentially the inner CBD areas?
We have seen that in recent years. More affordable parts of Australia have been outperforming the more expensive areas, which is, perhaps not surprising in an environment in which interest rates have risen very quickly. That's pushed housing affordability to some of the worst levels we've seen in at least 3 decades. In that environment, people have been looking for more affordable areas, more affordable options, and that's seen the prices for homes in those areas outperform more expensive areas typically.
All right, well, yeah, that brings us nicely on to home prices and how they've been going. I mean, just give us a sense of the property price growth this year in Australia.
Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting year for home prices, in many ways because it's changed what we've been seeing for the past few years. The past few years has really been a story of really divergent markets across Australia. We've had Adelaide, Perth, Brisbane growing at extremely rapid pace,
Have a look at that.
10, 15% per year through 22, 23, 24.
So Melbourne's the laggard, and that's because of those policies around land tax, so people are dodging it. So that seems to be working as intended, I guess. But people are still buying them there, just at a very lower rate. Look at that. Look at that. Look at Brisbane. That is insane. That's about, what's that? Well, that probably would have been 10%. 9, 10% in a year. Bonkers. Yeah, so Melbourne median values are last. Look at that. Melbourne's been left behind. I didn't know that. I thought it was about third. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Let me know your thoughts, comments. You an investor, not investor? Are you a renter? Are you an owner? What are you thinking about the property market at the moment? I'd love to hear about it. Thanks all. See you in the next video. Have a great day.